What I noticed, and I think that everybody at some point notices this when you start working or when you finish varsity. And this is not something that started with us. No. I feel like it was way worse before us. In fact, it's probably a little bit better now. But what I noticed is that we currently have such a big culture of endurance. Like you have to be a team player. There's this pressure to be a team player, to be dependable, the helper, the fixer, and this leads a lot of us to struggle with boundaries. We end up giving more than we even have, and we want to be seen as valuable. And so what ends up happening is we overwork and we overcompensate and we wear so many different hats, and we, get to the point, it gets so hectic to the point where you neglect your own self. You hold in your urine. You don't even go take a pee break because you just want to quickly finish this thing, just quickly send out this email. You don't take lunch. You don't take even a breath, right? And so this endurance work culture chips away at your passion for what you do, your love for what you do, your energy for doing what you do. And so before we discuss this, and I want us to really get into it in terms of literature and research, what research is saying about it, but before we even go there, I want us to first look at what the Bible says about this. Have you ever felt like you're pouring from an empty cup? Showing up for every single person in your life except for yourself? Well, today we're going to unpack burnout, what it is, how to tackle it, and how faith and science can guide us back to restoration. But before we continue, I want us to do something different from every other episode because I want us to start by playing a game. I want you to put 5 fingers up and we're going to drop fingers down based on what I say. So if you relate to the statement that I'm going to say, I want you to drop a finger down. And if you find that you drop more than 3 fingers down, then this episode is for you. So let's start with 5. Firstly, I want you to put a finger down if you wake up feeling tired. No matter how much you've slept, you just wake up feeling extremely drained. Secondly, put a finger down if you get irritated or emotionally drained easily by tasks that previously wouldn't even bother you at all. Maybe even previously tasks that you previously enjoyed. The third thing, put a finger down if you care very deeply about what you do, but these days or, at some point you find yourself being so numb and disconnected from it. Number 4, put a finger down if every single time you rest, you feel guilty, you feel bad, you feel like you should be doing something more productive. And fifthly, put a finger down if you say, let me just push through this week. If I can just make it through this week, I can do it. If you drop more than 3 fingers, you're in the right place because this conversation is then very much overdue, okay? And today we're going to learn that burnout is not really at all a failure, but rather it is a key and a wake-up call to let you see what's really happening and what you really need. You're listening to Healthy Hypocrites. This is the podcast where we get real about the messy intersection between faith, science, and health, and where we encourage healthcare workers like myself to be vulnerable. I'm your host, Tumi, dietitian and lactation consultant and a follower of Christ, and I believe that wellness is not about perfection, but instead it's about intention, honesty, and grace. And each week we unpack different topics from a scientific and a spiritual aspect so that we can live a life that is not just healthy, but a life that is whole. This is a topic that is so dear to me, and I feel as though it is dear to everyone because we can all resonate with the fact that there are times where we have just been flat out finished, especially in health or especially in situations where you've got a high pressure role, where you felt like your job is based on very urgent deadlines. You're a caregiver, you're a leader, you're a manager, if you know, you know. And if you know what it is to be burned out. You know what it is to be exhausted, to be tired. And not the tired that a nap is going to fix, but that deep, heavy tired that even sleep can't fix. You know what it is to be overwhelmed and heavy, no matter how many hours you've slept. And although we're in February, and quite honestly, we're quite fresh, We're fresh from December, we've rested, we've taken those breaks. And so this isn't necessarily a time where a lot of people are going to resonate with this, but this is the time where it builds up. It slowly builds up. And this year, I want us to catch burnout before it catches us. So let's get into my favorite part of the show. Let's get into the confession jar. Okay, guys. So this is the point where I'm going to be vulnerable. I brought out this jar because I'm going to pick out a random question based on today's topic. I'm going to be vulnerable. So please don't make me be vulnerable alone. Be vulnerable with me. Say your question or answer this question out loud to yourself. Type it out if you want to be that vulnerable. But I'm going to pick out a random question out of this jar. Let's see what I'm going to get today. So this is based on burnout. So the question of the day is, has burnout ever made you hate your job? Ooh, very tough. I mean, I hope my people are not watching this, my little employers and stuff. But basically, I'm just kidding. I honestly think that everyone has been burnt out. So let's answer the question. Has burnout ever made me hate my job? I want to say yes and no. It has never made me question my purpose and what I'm doing and why I'm doing what I did. Why did I even study those things? Never made me have an identity crisis, but it's definitely made me hate certain tasks. I remember I started working in private practice the beginning of 2024 as a dietitian. And by June, July, guys, I was working my bum off. I was working day, I was working night. I was barely taking lunch. I was bending over so backwards. I remember the time it hit August, I was up to here with meal plans. I didn't want to see another meal plan. If I saw a meal plan, I just want the earth to swallow me. You know what I'm saying? And things have happened and it transpired since then where I've rested, found a rhythm, and reapproached it. And now I love meal plans. Not to say that we're going to, just magically love things that we hate, but I really think that a big part of that was the burnout. It was the buildup that led to that downfall. And so that's something that I want to get into today. What even is burnout? How does it happen? Where do we get there? How do we even get there? And how do we recover? So before we even talk about any of these topics, let's actually define burnout. What is it? So it is a syndrome that comes due to chronic work stress that is not managed. Not just stress, stress that you manage here and there. You get stress in the highs and lows, but this is chronic, meaning long term. In the health world, chronic means anything that persists for longer than 3 months. So this is something that is happening over a long period of time and you're not managing it and you're not dealing with it. And it is usually, and this is a definition from the World Health Organization, and it's down to 3 dimensions and it manifests in 3 ways. The first way is energy depletion or exhaustion, that tiredness that even sleep cannot fix. The second thing is it happens when, you get this big mental distance from your job. You end up being negative about your job or cynical. It's almost like you start getting irritated by it. And then the third thing is you become less efficient at your job. You end up being sluggish or slow at certain things that you were once sharp at. You start to lose your touch, you start to lose your spark, your magic. And so this isn't something that happens overnight, but rather it is a slow, gradual thing where you push through that stress and fatigue and, that numbness, and one day there's just nothing left. And what I noticed, and I think that everybody at some point notices this when you start working or when you finish varsity. And this is not something that started with us. No. I feel like it was way worse before us. In fact, it's probably a little bit better now. But what I noticed is that we currently have such a big culture of endurance. Like you have to be a team player. There's this pressure to be a team player, to be dependable, the helper, the fixer, and this leads a lot of us to struggle with boundaries. We end up giving more than we even have, and we want to be seen as valuable. And so what ends up happening is we overwork and we overcompensate and we wear so many different hats, and we, get to the point, it gets so hectic to the point where you neglect your own self. You hold in your urine. You don't even go take a pee break because you just want to quickly finish this thing. Just quickly send out this email. You don't take lunch. You don't take even a breath. Right? And so this endurance work culture chips away at your passion for what you do, your love for what you do, your energy for doing what you do. And so before we discuss this, and I want us to really get into it in terms of literature and research, what research is saying about it, but before we even go there, I want us to first look at what the Bible says about this. So a common theme that I've found is that when it comes to the Bible, it shows us that even the strongest people, the strongest figures get tired. One of the most powerful reminders in scripture is that God modeled rest. Let's go back to the very beginning, to Genesis, right? Where God created, the stars, the moon, and the people, and everything. And then on the seventh day, he rested. Not because he was tired, but rather to establish a rhythm that this is the day we rest. He was intentional. He set it out as its own day. And Jesus as well, he rested and he prayed. And I want us to turn to Matthew chapter 11, verse 20 that says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." It doesn't say, no, I will give you more productivity. No, I will give you more pressure. No, I will give you rest. Even after Elijah, after that victory that he had, he became so emotionally exhausted that he turned to God and he said, "God, please, just take my life." And this was in 1 Kings 19. And God didn't take his life. Instead, what did God do? He let him sleep and rest. He fed him and he restored him. And so essentially what we need to come to know as the base and the foundation of burnout is that the solution is rest. And not just rest in the sleeping sense. And we're going to get into that, but proper true rest. Okay. So our goal as, Christians as followers of Christ is we always want to be more like Christ. And I think that this is an aspect where it's so overlooked because at the end of the day, we also have the pressure to work and to become something because our economy today is so different from the economy that, our parents had or our grandparents had. And at the same time, our opportunities are much more or much less, depending on where you're looking at it from, than our parents had or our grandparents had. It's such a weird time. It's such a weird world, where we're kind of put in a default setting to overwork and to overcompensate and to become and to do this. And so where this world is so chaotic and there's so much to do and there's so much where we need to stay on our toes and create, we need to as well remember that if we want to be more like Christ, we need to follow in his steps. We need to schedule rest. We are not designed to be constantly on output mode. Our bodies need that rhythm of work and rest, of input and output, of stress and recovery. And this modern life that it just forces us to put us in a mode of overworking, and over time it has such negative impacts on our nervous system. It puts us in this survival mode, and that exhaustion becomes chronic, it becomes long-term. And so I want us to talk about this. How do we actually even then know that we're burned out? What are the early signs that we can use to identify? When this video started, we talked about quick 5 signs that you should know or that would indicate some kind of burnout that you've experienced or that you are experiencing at this moment. But let's talk about it a little bit more. So firstly, we spoke about how being tired after sleeping is something that happens, even after sleeping. Another thing is you lose motivation for the things that you once loved, that you were once so fiery and passionate about. You're highly irritable. Anything, any small little thing irritates you or bores you, and that could be a sign that you're burned out. So if there's someone in your office who's highly irritable and they're always on edge and they're always like, so, you say one wrong thing and they'll explode, they're probably burned out. That's not an excuse. Never, ever, ever an excuse. But it is an eye-opener that burnout is more common than we think. It's almost everywhere. You might experience some emotional numbness that we spoke about. You end up procrastinating. You dread tasks that once gave you joy, fulfillment, purpose, excitement. Another thing is brain fog. You can't think clearly. You're a little bit sluggish and slow. And so what happens is that it whispers. Burnout whispers before it even screams. And the problem is that we end up ignoring it. And we ignore it because we think to ourselves, no, man, I should be able to do this. Other people have it worse. What I'm dealing with it is nothing. If I rest, I'm being lazy. I could have done this. I could have done that. I could have done this and that. No. I can push through. I can do this. I think a lot of the time why we do this is because we tie our worth to how much we're able to put out, how productive we are. And so if we don't work and we're not productive and we rest, it almost feels like, no, we're being worthless now. We're being useless. It's like a threat to our identity if we rest. I want us to talk about this further to understand that if we continue this way, where are we going to end up? What are the long-term and what are the short-term consequences of this? Well, on a short-term basis, we'll be constantly tired, have that brain fog, be having very poor sleep quality, low motivation, irritable, like we spoke about. But also, it will be so hard for us to concentrate on the tasks that really need us to be sharp. We'll be emotionally flat. We'll start avoiding things and tasks, even if it's like the easiest thing. You'll avoid it. You'll say, no, not now, tomorrow, later, not now, tomorrow. And so what happens is our body's in this high stress state, and this cortisol, the stress hormone, is so high that even when we rest, it is just not restorative anymore. And on a long-term basis, things that happen are way more serious than we think. Burnout can lead to depression. It can lead to high levels of anxiety. It can even lower your immune system and make you very prone to colds and sicknesses. It disrupts our hormones. It causes memory loss. And it disrupts your focus and your decision-making process. Emotional detachment, it causes compassion fatigues. You lose your sense of joy, your purpose, and over time it just drains your energy. It changes how we think, how we feel, and even how we see ourselves. So this ought to be taken seriously. This is something that we need to not just play it off like, oh no, I'm just tired. Yeah, we'll get there. We just need to push through one more day. No, we need to hold on and really, really, really intervene. The reason why I want you guys to see that this is something that is so dire and so crazy is because, and this took me so aback, I read a systematic review, a study that was talking about the effects of burnout. And so the goal of the study was to analyze the relationship between how burned out the staff is and how safe the patients are. And before I even explain the findings of the study, I want to share some figures with you that shocked me. 250,000 people, and okay, this study was from 2019, so I mean, I don't know what the figures are now, but 250,000 people die every year from medical error, from people who made mistakes that were avoidable. 250,000. 250,000. Guys, imagine how many people you went to school with, right? In my high school, we were probably about 500 people. How many schools? How many high schools? I think in this day and age where there's so many views and viral posts and so many things, we lose touch with the fact that 100 people is a lot. It's a lot. Now imagine 250,000 people dying when they did not have to die. They were not meant to die. But a mistake was made at the hands, and this can be attributed to burnout. And so what they found is that high levels of burnout in healthcare workers, and this study really focused on physicians and nurses, it worsens patient safety. And to put things in perspective, medical error is the third leading cause of death in the United States, or rather at the time of the study it was. And the factors that contribute towards this is having a high workload, having long journeys, and ineffective interpersonal relationships. And this one caught me off guard. This ineffective interpersonal relationships. He's telling me if I don't have a good relationship with my colleague, I can burn out quicker. Like, isn't that so crazy? So I just want to define that. what are interpersonal relationships? So, interpersonal relationships are social and emotional connections between employees, managers, and colleagues. And so, the key is for positive, collaborative work in order to ensure, a safe and good interpersonal relationship. And so, what this systematic review, the study found, was that burnout affects us in terms of our performance, our decision making, and the quality of care and the quality of work that we put out. And yes, it sounds obvious, but it's like we almost like want to work because we want to be impactful and we want to be powerful and we want to be purposeful. But it's like if you're pouring from an empty cup, then is the person on the receiving end even going to see and the benefits or the wonders of your work? You know what I'm saying? So something that we need to also look into is we need to heal and recovering from this. It doesn't start with us just saying, okay, no, let me stop everything, have a quiet life, do nothing for like a week. Okay, maybe that would help, but that's not necessarily what I'm leading to. So let's talk about these things. Let's talk about what we can do in order to recover. The very first thing is we need to acknowledge our limits, right? We need to remember that Tumi, or whoever your name is, I am not a robot, right? I'm not meant to be working 16 hours a day. I'm not meant to be working 7 days a week. I'm not a robot. I'm a human. And so I have limits. You need to, and not everyone's limits are the same, right? Some people end off at 4 hours. After 4 hours, that's it. That's all I have in me. This is my limit. Some people can only work in intervals. Some people can only work all the way through. So find out what your limits are and define them, right? The second thing is redefine rest. Rest is not just sleeping at night and closing your eyes and then waking up and then you've rested. No, we need to see how can we emotionally rest? How can we spiritually rest? Does that mean that you need to go offline for a certain amount of time? Does that mean that you need to go and get a massage once a week or once a month for yourself? What is that for you? What is the spiritual rest? Does that mean that you want to join a home cell every Wednesday just to pour into your spiritual cup? Does that mean that you're going to take 10 minutes strictly every single day to have a prayer? What does it mean for you to rest spiritually, to rest emotionally, to rest socially? Do you need to get a counselor, someone objective to chat to in order to pour out and drain all of these issues that you're facing? What do you need? Redefine rest for you. Not for you, not for him, not for her, not for them, but for you. And schedule it and be strict about it. In fact, speaking of number three, and speaking of strict, number 3 is that we need to set boundaries. And not just with other people, but with ourselves too. If you said, I'm clocking in at 8 and I'm leaving at 5, then do that. Do that. Don't overextend yourself when you know that if I do this tomorrow, I'm going to be rolling on the floor, unable to give my all, 8 to 5. If you know that I give my best work, 8 to 5, and if I do more than that, I'm going to be trash tomorrow, then what's the point? If you're going to show up, try to show up in your best way every single day. And if your best way means that I need to start here and stop there, then do that. Create that boundary for yourself, between other people. Don't take on tasks that you don't have the capacity for. It's easier said than done. It's easier said than done. Sometimes we really do need to. I'm not saying be this terrible person who never helps anyone and does no favors and only thinks about themselves. Never. I'm not saying that. But I just want you to recognize where your limit is, where you can pour into someone's cup. And when your cup is completely empty, then rather not. Because you can't pour from an empty cup. And then number 4 is to reconnect with your purpose. Find the thing that you can do to make you fall in love with your purpose again. It's, what's so crazy about a purpose is you're constantly falling in and out of it in terms of your feelings, but in terms of your center, it feels like it's your center of gravity. You cannot sway from it. You cannot avoid it. But sometimes you love it, sometimes you hate it. So find the things that make you love it. And the very 5th thing, okay, I almost forgot about this 5th thing, is And this is a minor thing, right? This is more of like a background thing. Is in the best way that you can contribute to better interpersonal relationships. Sometimes it's not up to you, but sometimes it is. Are you that Are you that person who is bratty around the office, who's moody, who's sassy, who's snappy, who's irritable? If you are that person, you're contributing to other people's burnout. Okay? You're probably contributing to your own burnout. Learn how to communicate. Talk to people. When you first see something come up, try to speak about it if you can. I mean, a lot of the times we can't speak about things because we think that it's going to jeopardize the relationship that we have with our colleague. But sometimes if you're coming from a place of love, of compassion, you never know, And just really practicing that active listening, that empathy, that communication can probably do so much for our interpersonal relationships with our colleagues, with our managers, that we never know. There's things that, I'm not going to mention anything, obviously, but there's things that I had on my mind for weeks and weeks and weeks. And it would be like a thing that I'm worried about my employer is doing this or doing that. And so I just ask her hey, I noticed this. Is this true? And you won't understand, guys. Weights and weights get lifted off of my shoulders when I communicate certain things, and they're often very controversial, very taboo, very difficult topics. But if the person on the receiving end is not ready, then that's kind of really not it's on them to do that personal development and that personal growth. You know what I'm saying? But it's also your responsibility to deliver it in such a way that meets them at their level, while trying to do what's best for that for you, for that weight that you need to release. Okay, but always remember, guys, be respectful, be kind, be graceful. Everybody's carrying some kind of mental load. Okay, so what I want to share as well is something that teaches us about faith and restoration. Psalm 23 that says, He restoreth my soul. Not I restoreth my soul, He restoreth my soul. So sometimes we need to remember that restoration is not something we achieve, but rather something we receive. And as we close, I just want us to remember that the takeaway is that sometimes you give and you give and you give. You show up for your clients, your patients, your family, your friends, your responsibility, but you forget that you also need to pour into yourself. So this episode is a reminder of that. What you need to take today is that rest is absolutely not weakness. It is wisdom, actually. And even God built it into creation. Jesus practiced it. Prophets needed it. Science and studies back it up. We need to rest so that we can be the best version of ourselves. You've been listening to Healthy Hypocrites, where we get real about wellness and grace. And I'm Tumi. And until next time, remember that you do not need to be perfect to be at peace. You just need to be present and intentional. And I will see you next week, Tuesday at 6. Bye.